This is Christopher and Catherine Zipper of Hunter Benefits Consulting Group, your favorite 401 couple. This is our, this is going to be released in order here. This is our second ever podcast taping. Do the kids say taping? Okay. No, they don't. Okay. This is our very first one with a guest. For those of you who are familiar with the YouTube series where our shtick is bourbon, with the podcast series, the guest gets to pick the libation. And our guest today was very clear that she prefers to eat her calories instead of drinking her calories. So we are doing a lovely apple pie. And with the way that pre-recording went, maybe we'll be diving into the bourbon still. Anyways, we are very excited to have our very good friend, Jennifer Wiczynski of Kismet Benefits Counselor. Okay, yes, I had to look up her real company name because I just call her JW. She is going to be our very first podcast guest. All right. We are going to have her on. I would like her to be a very regular guest. She's got a lot of comments, thoughts that I value highly in ERISA land and other things. I asked her a couple of weeks ago to talk me off the ledge, which is pretty much her primary role in life, is to keep me off the ledge. And at that time, the specific subject was Chevron. And we're not talking about the gas station. We are talking about the Supreme Court decision. And Filippo, you show up at these things to learn so much, don't you? While we're just going on and on about various stuff you never knew existed. All right.
I'm going to start it if you want me to. So my understanding of Chevron was, what was the problem that they were solving? Trying to control chaos, right? It's trying to say where decisions are actually made, and the law can be kind of crazy. Congress puts things out there, we're not sure what to do. So agencies like the Department of Labor, the IRS, they can go, this
EPA.
is what it's going to be, and then we have our marching orders on how to do things. And that was true since, what is Chevron? Was it like in the 70s or something? It was a while
80s.
ago after Enron, right?
Yeah,
80s.
it was in
So
the,
it's been
it was
true
in the
for a long
80s.
time. But what's happened in recent times is the Chevron ruling was put aside. And then suddenly the TPA world kind of exploded and said, what's going to happen if the DOL and the IRS are either what second guess, or courts doing all sorts of chaos? And then Jennifer quite nicely said, let's talk about settled law versus unsettled law. So bringing us from our anxiety of, oh my God, is it chaos, to actually it isn't chaos. So tell us why you don't think it's chaos, Jennifer.
Okay,
Was that a good introduction, Jennifer?
that was excellent. Thank you, Catherine, because I was preparing for this, and this decision actually brings up a lot of things that I don't think most people who didn't go to law school, most people don't know what really this is arguing about. And so let me just kind of let's do a brief schoolhouse rock of law, okay? Which will kind of explain how we got here.
And also, okay, Jennifer, by the way, obviously, the rules of the podcast are you can ask us potentially very embarrassing questions and have a lot of fun if we have no idea what the right answers are. Okay?
That sounds fair.
You good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right. So let's go back. Conjunction, junction, what's your function? To how a bill becomes law, which is really what this comes down to. Okay. Well, this and one other thing,
Right.
which is kind of near and dear to my heart that I don't think most people understand about the Supreme Court, or know, really, because you wouldn't if you never went to law school. So first, okay, we have 3 branches of government, right? Which some may question at certain moments in reality, but well, for full disclosure, I hate everybody. So I'm an ideologue centrist. So there you go. Okay, take me as you will.
Okay.
You have the Constitution, which says we have 3 branches of government. We have the legislature, which writes the laws. We have the executive branch, which includes the president and everybody else who he asks to help him execute the laws. Then we have the judicial branch, which says, and if we go back to the Constitution, and that's where this is really important and why this decision kind of matters, and it's an argument that's actually been going on for more than 200 years. The judicial branch has the right of original jurisdiction over a certain chunk of cases, and it has the right of appellate jurisdiction over other cases. If you look at the Constitution, if you look at Article 3, those are actually the powers delineated to it by the Constitution, okay? So, we've got...
Delineated to the judicial branch.
Correct. Yes. If you go and look at Article 3 of the Constitution, which I reread in preparation for this podcast, that's specifically what the Constitution gives to the judiciary. Oh yeah, I pulled out my Con Law 1 law school outlines and everything. So, what this is really arguing about is the legislature writes the laws. That's its job, is to sit down and write the laws of the country and pass them with all of your elected representatives who, of course, represent your wants and needs and everything else. Nod and go with it. So what Chevron was saying back in the day, and actually I would have loved this because it would have been fun, because conservatives would have been really angry about this. Nothing personal against conservatives, but Chief Justice Roberts, he actually wrote an opinion that said this a long time ago. Not like super long time ago, but it was in his opinion of the Affordable Care Act that upheld part of the Affordable Care Act. He very nicely, very lawyerly said, Congress, do not give me crappy laws, because I, as a jurist, have a requirement to make them work within the bounds of the Constitution if I can find a way to make them work. So what Chevron said, basically in a very, very nutshell, was when Congress isn't clear, can the executive branch interpret in Congress's stead? And Chevron said, well...
The executive branch, yes, okay.
If the executive branch did... So what we have to have first in the law is we have to have an ambiguity, which we could have an entire conversation of what lawyers and judges think ambiguity means. Okay? So first we have to have ambiguity. We have...
It's ambiguous?
Yes.
Okay.
It's ambiguously ambiguous. Legislature gives us laws. There's a gap somewhere, which could be for a variety of reasons.
Yep.
Especially because Congress
outsources. We're going to have some examples later, yes.
Most of its laws. Yeah. So, when there is that ambiguity, the executive branch tries to fill in the blanks. And when...
Okay.
So, with Chevron, I believe it was I think it was the EPA. They filled in the blank in some law in, I believe, the Clean Water Act. Yeah. So
right.
they were interpreting...
it was Clean Air, but anyways, keep going.
Yeah, Clean Air Act. They were interpreting the definition of a word because Congress didn't define it. And what the Supreme Court said in Chevron was, yep, this is where when you break this down and really look at it, this is what we're really talking about. So Chevron said, look, if the executive branch interpreted, they made an interpretation because they have the expertise, courts should defer to that. They don't have to, but they should.
Okay, courts should. Okay.
Right.
Jennifer, hang on a second. when you're talking about Chevron, are you talking about years ago or now?
Yeah, no, we're working back to front, okay? Past to current, okay?
Okay, got it. Just to make sure. That,
Yeah. So that's what I was saying. Like, hey, if the executive branch has interpreted a law, they've got the expertise, they've got the knowledge, they're the ones who are supposed to be executing it. Courts, you should defer to them. Okay? You should defer to
okay.
that interpretation. So the Lopez decision, which is where the current Supreme Court came back and said, wait a second, we have interpretive power. That's our rule. We also have the APA, which is like the Administrative Procedures Act, which guides federal judges and how they're supposed to do interpretations. So Roberts,
Okay.
with the majority, came down and said, yeah, we've already got this. This is ours. This is our job. We can look at interpretation, but interpretation doesn't get to tell us to do our job. That's basically what the majority said in the Lopez decision. But what I want to take a quick step back at and really look at is, what are they talking about when they talk about their interpretive power? Okay, the Supreme Court's power to interpret laws. And that's where I was mentioning that before. Okay, is that in the Constitution? That's an actual question. Feel free to try to answer.
Did you find it? No, I'm guessing you're going to say it's not. I'm just taking a guess.
It is not. Article 3, Section 1 says the judicial power of the United States shall be invested in one Supreme Court and such inferior courts. Judges shall hold their offices during good behavior, receive comp. Section 2 says what type of cases the Supreme Court, or where the judicial power extends, law and equity, ambassadors, manner, blah, blah, blah. And then Section 3 comes down to treason. So nowhere in Article 3 of the Constitution does it say the Supreme Court has the power to interpret laws. To interpret the laws against the Constitution. Do we want to hear the story then of how the Supreme Court got that power? Because it's fun story.
Yes, teacher, we do.
Okay, so if you know anything about history, everybody for a long time probably thought John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, they were BFFs during the whole Continental Congress thing and drafting the Constitution, right? And they were. Maybe kind of sort of.
I don't know. I've watched the Franklin thing on Apple Plus. I don't know they were, so.
No, I think Adams thought they were. Yeah. But Jefferson, he had his own things. So by the time John Adams is done being president, or even within that process, they are not besties anymore. No more besties at all. Zero love lost between the two of them. So Adams loses to Jefferson in the election, and as he's leaving office, he goes and makes a bunch of appointments from his Federalist Party to the circuit judges and justice of the peace. Now, to do that, you had to confirm the appointment and deliver the commissions. Well, the Secretary of State at the time didn't get all of the commissions delivered. So there was one commission which belonged to William Marbury that he did not actually physically get the commission. So then he filed a lawsuit with the Supreme Court asking them to issue a writ of mandamus, which is basically a piece of paper telling someone else to do what you're supposed to do. So he wanted the Supreme Court to issue a written mandamus to make Madison give him commission. All right? But here's the problem.
Okay. Yep.
The dude that was responsible under Adams to deliver the commission is now the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Marshall.
Ah.
And
Okay.
he does not want to piss off his new boss, Thomas Jefferson. So he proceeds
Okay.
to write what is a 4-page logic argument to basically make sure he doesn't lose his job and piss off Jefferson, but still kind of keep everything okay. And through that, he analyzes that because the Constitution is a limitation of powers, and it is the supreme law of the land,
Okay.
and the Supreme Court has the role, of the cases about the law, the only way the Supreme Court can really do its job is if it's protecting the Constitution, and by doing that, interpreting the laws on whether or not they are in favor or they violate the Constitution. Chief Justice John Marshall is the one, through this opinion, that creates the law that the Supreme Court has the power to interpret the laws of the United States and the Constitution. It is not a constitutional power.
So 220-some years ago. Okay.
Yeah. So in theory,
Interesting.
we are still
I just
arguing
guessed it
about
was
that.
in there. Yeah.
So what we're talking about then
Glad
is
it's settled.
no. We're talking about what are the extents still of that power? Okay. Now, is the short version of this is 3 things. First, the Lopez decision was very clear. This does not go back and change anything that's happened before this decision. If it was decided under Chevron deference, it stays under Chevron deference. We are not going to see a slew of lawsuits going back and undoing retirement plans. It's not going to happen.
Okay.
There are certain things that are going to continue to be argued about.
So Jennifer, the current Chevron decision is prospective only.
Correct.
There is no backdate. There is no backdating concept under the current or the newest Chevron Supreme Court ruling.
That is correct. Hold on one second.
Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you.
Well, let's see. Here we go. Let me find this here. Okay. By doing so, however, we do not call into question prior cases that relied on the Chevron framework. The holdings of those cases that specific agency actions are lawful, including the Clean Air Act holding Chevron itself, are still subject to statutory stare decisis despite our change in interpretive methodology in the case. So,
Okay.
No go back.
Wow.
Are we good on that one?
Okay. Yes, that's very good to know. Okay.
So can I just say that's already good news for us all? Because
Definitely,
as you told me, there's settled versus unsettled law in general, and a great deal of retirement plan ideas are settled law. They're not unsettled, they are settled. So,
Okay.
okay.
Right.
No Etch-a-Sketch. We don't get
No,
to
Oh,
shake
that's
it.
this was not.
Yeah, that's it.
This is not
that's
No. That was very clear.
very good to know. Very good to know.
What the majority is saying is that courts must exercise their independent judgment on deciding whether an agency has acted within its statutory authority as the APA requires. Now, you could parse that down and have a lot of fun with it depending on your political position, but the point being they're saying we are independent, which does really match what Chief Justice Marshall was saying 200 and some odd years ago. Are the governments that these two gentlemen work under vastly different? 100%. But
Yes.
let's look at how then our laws work in ERISA. Because there are some areas where this is going to really hurt. EPA is a big one. Okay, but for us,
can we use Secure 2.0 as an example, Jennifer?
Yeah.
Because there's a couple of things that you and I have talked about that were certain things are missing, and that's actually, I think, the most recent law relating to us. So maybe we can pull examples from there. Is that all right?
That's a great example. So
okay, cool.
Let's start there. Okay. Which works into more of the let's understand how our laws work. Okay, so Congress passed Secure 2.0, like you're saying. Okay. We have two types of provisions in there. We have the types of provisions where Congress said, here's a law, blah, 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 blah. For example, they made a bunch of changes to self-correction under EPCRS.
You know, one day that's going to show up in a law. Okay. Yep.
Blah, 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 blah. I hope so. I hope someone green M&Ms that. Because that would be lovely. For any Van Halen fans out there.
You're going to green them in the Constitution. Okay, got it.
It's the Van Halen reference.
Yes.
So, okay.
Oh, I know. I understand. I know. Yes, I know it completely. Yes.
So Congress made a bunch of changes to self-correction, and then they said to the IRS, go up EPCRS. You have until December 31st of 2024, which knock, 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 IRS, tick-tock, tick-tock. Anyway, they said, go issue the regulations for this. Now, that is one thing that's very specific in this. If Congress has delegated its authority to the executive branch to interpret, then the only thing the court is supposed to make sure that what they do is that they don't, what their interpretation doesn't violate the Constitution. Okay, so that's level one. All right. Congress passes law. Congress clearly states, IRS, go do this. Go interpret this. Go pass regulations governing this. And there's
because the law specifically tells a branch of government that's under the executive, in this case, the Internal Revenue Service, because the law passed by Congress, signed by the president, tells an executive branch department to do something, whatever that executive branch department is doing under that directive, I can't say can't be challenged, but that should be considered solid, right?
It's got less wiggle room than where
that's a better phrase.
Ambiguity. That's not ambiguous. Congress was very clear. You go do this.
Correct.
So then, if someone challenges it, you have to be challenging it on their interpretation being unconstitutional, not necessarily overstepping their bounds. Okay? So, if we look at
which is a completely different conversation. Yeah.
Correct. So, let's use the actual Lopez case as an example. What it had to do with was fisheries, and when you have to have certain people that watch how the fishing happens, who pays for that? Okay? The law, the written law, said that group 1, 2, or 3 pays for it. And group 3 was like North Pacific fishermen. Well, whichever branch of government this was, I forget, they went and applied the same system to the Atlantic fisheries. The law said Pacific fisheries. So the Atlantic guys were pissed off because where in the law did it say this applied to us? So the Supreme Court went and said,
got it. Understood.
No. So this is where the challenge, this is where like Supreme Court cases, everybody thinks the Supreme Court decision is like this. I don't know if I'm making my hand too wide. That a Supreme Court decision is like this.
Real wide, yes.
Really wide, yes. But what it really comes down to is generally one very specific question of law that could potentially have ramifications in other situations, but you have to have someone who's going to sue about it. So, continuing with your example, Christopher.
Okay. So
there are different positions right now on how you calculate the conversion from a simple to a safe harbor 401k plan and how you calculate the deferral limits. Because catch-ups were left out of one part of it. There's 365 days used, even though every 4 years we have 366 days.
66.
So,
yep.
The law does not say, that specific law, Insecure 2.0 does not say, here's what we thought, now IRS, go figure it out. Okay? So, we now have ambiguity.
It does not say that.
Correct.
Yeah, correct.
That is one of the provisions that the Congress has not clearly said to the IRS, go issue regulations about this. Now, the IRS, though, we have different levels of interpretation. We have different levels of guidance, even within what we do. Okay? We have regulations. We have revenue procedures. We have revenue rulings. And we have notices. Think of them as a gradient scale.
Okay.
Regulations are most important. Revenue procedures tell us how to do something. Revenue rulings are just kind of like, this is what we think. And notices are, we got to kind of get something out now, so let's do something.
Okay, so do you know why I'm laughing? I've been doing, this is my 36th year. You are the first, no, not when the shark bites. You are the very first person to ever say this to me. Nobody, with all their pontificating in the past 35 years, has ever said there's a specific hierarchy of regulation, rev proc, rev ruling, and notice. Who knew?
It's the same within regular law, though, too.
See, if you'd done that as a question, I'd have gotten it wrong. Yeah. Okay.
But this is, the same happens across laws altogether, and in the state too. The legislative body passes a law. Okay, then you have regulations that do stuff with the law, and then you have a whole bunch of other type of guidance with municipal codes. You have all this. Are your municipal codes as strong as the law of the state of Illinois? I mean, your county probably thinks so. But no. So yeah, there's and that's just like
that that makes sense. But yeah. All right, I got you.
So this is important because
what
regulations have a process. They have its own mini legislative process. We just saw it. Okay. The new R&D regs. They came out with a notice of proposed rulemaking years ago. They opened it for comment. They had a hearing. Then they issued final regulations, plus some more proposed regulation. Think of that as mini laws for the IRS. Okay. The courts.
So something that is a final reg has as little wiggle room as a law saying something specific?
Not as little, but almost as powerful from a court interpretation. Yes. Okay. Yes. So let's think of it this way. If the IRS issued proposed regulations on how to calculate the simple to safe harbor limit transitions, and they went through that whole process, or here's the question, they go through the full regulation process, or they issue a notice, which is more powerful? Which is higher standing?
The regulatory process.
Correct.
The process, because you had public hearings and everything else. Okay.
Exactly. Okay. And
Whereas the
think
notice could
about,
be some random typing. Yeah. Okay.
so if someone then went and challenged a regulation, one of our regs. So I think one of the arguments I heard one of my clients give me is like, okay, well, we still didn't have to go do ADP testing. Well, number one, I'm pretty sure like
Yes.
ADP, like, non-discrimination, that's part of the code for one. But then if you wanted to say, well, I think that the
Right.
way they interpreted it to actually administer the test is wrong. Those are regulations. Those went through the regulation rulemaking process. If they wanted to challenge that, they'd have to prove constitutionality versus we've gone past our mandate and have done way more interpretation than we were supposed to. Now, if it had been a revenue
Okay.
ruling
All right.
or a notice, that would be less powerful.
So we have to have documents. We have amendment and restatement periods. We have the mandatory amendment and restatement periods. We have 5500s. We have RMDs. Basic core things like that are not under threat and are not going to be, the basic concept of them is not going to be challenged. All right. And then we've got, so what we have as a gap is, let's going back to Secure 2.0, and let's just, because we got a lot to pick from, let's just pick simple to 401k conversion. There's a lot of things in there that are not mentioned in the statute, and statute's a good word for law, right? Okay, all right.
It is the word for law.
And okay, so we've got those in the statute, so that stuff's clear, but the stuff that is missing, like the catch-up in the 401k deferral limits, that because that's missing, we would have to wait for final regs to say one way or the other, and that would be a clear guidance. Is that correct? Because it's not mentioned in the statute.
Right. And then how they give the guidance, whether they go
Okay.
through the full regulatory process versus just issue a revenue ruling or a notice, is where you could maybe get a challenge.
Right, but some simple IRA, and I'm just making up a story, and I just honestly just thought of this, but some simple IRA provider couldn't grasp onto Chevron and say it's inappropriate to convert from simple to 401k because of Chevron, okay? Because simple to 401k is defined by statute as to what to do with just a couple of logic holes or process holes is maybe a better phrase.
That's
So
unconstitutional.
is that correct?
Yeah. Unless they could say that that's unconstitutional. No, that's not the point of Chevron. The point of Chevron is saying, or the point of this argument is, where is the Supreme Court's interpretation? Like, how is it supposed to interpret, and what do they give more weight in their interpretation? Chevron said you have to give the executive branch's interpretation more weight. The Supreme Court came back and said, neither, no, we don't. So what then
Is
you
it the
have
word
to...
deference? I thought you told me the word deference was in there.
Yeah,
Don't we have to give it some weight, right?
Well, down to neither, we don't. I think that makes
Neither.
Pretty much.
Blah, 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 and neither. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah.
That's right. Boil it down to its essence.
So Jennifer, inside the ERISA community, and let's expand it to our non-ERISA friends, non-ERISA 403B and municipal plans, okay, just to make it a broad scope, just in case, okay. Is there something as a result of Chevron that that you think is most likely to be challenged or most likely to be sued, used in a lawsuit because of Chevron? Is there anything inside our world, including defined benefit plans, that could, I don't think, maybe not put at risk, but likely to get sued about?
I think the main one is the one you see right now.
Is there something out there, or is this
the fiduciary rule, which they're still
fiduciary regs?
Yeah. Because even
Yeah.
though,
Well,
because
I think even
is
if that had been statute and final right, they were still going to argue.
and that's the other thing to remember with this. Okay, so let's think about this process. All right, let's really think about the litigation process, and let's stick with our example to make it easy. Okay, IRS, let's say by the end of the year, which is extraordinarily unhelpful as conversions have been going on, or in theory attempted to go on throughout the year. Oh, here's the one. Here's the one with the simple conversion, the effective date.
Right.
There's a position out there right now, and I'm not saying it's right. It's not saying it's wrong.
Short
I'm saying
value.
it's great. Yes. And does that abolish the ability to have a cash balance plan? Okay. So let's say the IRS issues regulations, not regulations. Let's say the IRS issues a notice at the end of the year that says, it is our interpretation that your 401k plan has to have a short plan year, and your cash balance plan, you couldn't do a cash balance plan because it would violate the exclusive plan rule. There you go. There's our notice. Okay. What did we have with the notice? We just had the IRS coming down and saying, this is what we believe. So, how then would this rule change things? First, you would have to get a plan willing to sue and willing to pay the money, which means a federal lawsuit, which means generally you're looking at a minimum retainer of $25,000 plus. That's just to get started. You've got to have a good enough bankroll to continue to bankroll it, because it's not going to go straight to the Supreme Court. It's got to still follow the normal rules. So, you've got to go to your
the appeal and everything else.
Court, then your appeals. So this is years down the road. Okay. Now, could a bunch of defined benefit plans band together that started this year and interpreted Secure 2.0 differently and go and say, yeah, we disagree. We think this is the IRS stepping outside its bounds because Congress did not tell it to interpret regulations. They've just made this interpretation. Could a bunch of them get together and do that? Sure, they could. Are they going to do that? Is the question. So where in our industry
you need the equivalent of a class action lawsuit. Okay.
Exactly. So where in our industry do we fees and fiduciaries? Schlichter's going after fees and fiduciaries. Sorry, Mr. Schlichter. I mean, that's what you do. You're not going to get a bunch of DB plans together to challenge any simple notice or revenue or exit come. So that's where.
Okay.
Can lawyers go down a rabbit hole with this? 100%. For TPAs, is it going to significantly change how you run your day-to-day administration of retirement plans? No.
Nope.
You know what this does?
Okay.
You know what the easiest fix for this? What's the easiest fix to prevent an issue of interpretation?
We'll put it in the statute. Clarify the statute.
Which means we should do what? Write better laws. Care about who you elect.
How do we find out you're optimist?
Can we use Copilot to write better laws?
No, probably not.
No.
Too many hallucinations.
Too many hallucinations.
Like Robert's
we'll end up in Denmark. Okay. All right.
Write better.
So really, though, the real question, though, is, Jennifer, do you think it will force better lawmaking?
Oh, not just for our industry, but in general?
I have seen a couple of articles where Congress people have been making strides towards that. Do I think the legislative system is currently structured in a way that could happen wholesale overnight? No. And if you read Secure 2.0, no. But I wish, and I hope, and I dream.
You are a huge fan of the lovely, concise, intelligent intelligent, consistent prose that is contained inside Secure 2.0, aren't you?
I was so
Nope.
angry reading that. I had to stop multiple times while reading that. You go, who wrote
Okay.
this? So,
Yeah, we
does that
we
make
have a
sense?
phrase for it that we're trying to have a PG podcast here, so we can't say my favorite phrase. But yes, so okay, so while I want to have you on while I would Jennifer, thank you very much for playing Schoolhouse Rock with us. That's greatly appreciated in all seriousness. All right. There was a little bit of a concern. We've had a little bit of concern. We will generally look at the worst possible option, okay? And maybe being a compliance geek and presume that the sky is falling, all right? But it's very nice to know that Chevron does not bring an end to our world. Chevron does not bring an end to annual 402G and 415 limit increases. It does not bring an end to required
Is that
5,500
like,
filings and
did
all of
someone
those things.
put that
There's the
somewhere?
pos.
Was
No,
that
I
like
just
somebody's
no.
opinion?
We can just no. Just our hallucinations. Okay. So,
Okay.
but you don't know. You
No,
don't know. All right.
no.
So it is nice to know that Chevron
There's
is
nothing
a
to technical.
possible, I don't want to say curiosity, a possible complexity in the future, but basically a group of, you're going to have a class action suit or something like that in order for something Chevron related to impact us. We have a lot of other challenges, but this is not being added to that pile. All right.
Yeah.
So I would like to thank you very much for being our very first guest. I would like to thank you very much for picking apple pie. You're in Washington. Is it going to be cherry pies next time or something? So we'll have to think of something else next time. I would very much like to ask you back on so that you've been very nice and scholarly here. Okay, you've been very appropriately teacherly. All right. But I would like to have you on another podcast as a guest, um, where maybe you're really angry beforehand and we talk about Secure 2.0, because I would like to
Oh, I
set
don't
you
need to
off on
be
a
angry
rant.
beforehand.
Okay. And
So
have,
let me do a
okay,
disclaimer with
and
that.
set you off
Quick.
on a rant, and maybe that,
Let me do a
what?
quick disclaimer. The opinions expressed here are my own opinions personally. They are not the opinions of my entity, Kismet Benefits Counselor LLC, nor are they the opinions of Hunter Benefits Consulting Group. And they should not be mass reproduced, nor should they be considered anything but opinions, which everybody has opinions. Nor am I giving legal advice or tax advice. So there you go.
Are we close,
I mean,
Jennifer?
people are going to have different interpretations. What it comes down to is, are you really
Yep.
who's going to challenge what? Now, do I think this is a great setup challenge for
Okay.
anybody who's challenging the DOL fiduciary rule? Yeah, because a lot of what they stand on is like, this has been our position for years and years and years. This is a perfect example of the Supreme Court saying,
Okay.
we don't care. We don't. So, but
Yeah,
for what we do day to
but
day,
even if all of that goes away,
yeah.
yeah.
No, our
And
day to day doesn't
even
change.
if the fiduciary rule gets blown up, you're not going to see a whole bunch of A shares on the record keeping platforms
No,
charging front end loads. Okay.
no.
There's a lot of things that we've kind of gone from, we're in terms of the fiduciary rule, there's a lot of stuff that even if most of it is thrown out, the way we operate is still going to stay the same in terms of in terms of notices and how people get compensated. So in terms of transparency for participants, I don't see that going away, because 40485 and 408B2, since they got numbers in front of them, that's a statute, right? That's a law, right? Yeah. Ooh,
Yeah.
I'm learning so much today. Thank you, Jennifer. You're my favorite teacher lately, okay? In the past 15 years. So thank you very much. Catherine?
2 cents. So I think where some of the anxiety comes is a lot of us don't know how laws are made. We sit around waiting for final interpretations, final regs, and we don't know
Don't
what they're
come.
going to be. And so there's this gap, and then it sounds like, oh, is there a new decision maker now? If there's a new decision maker, if mom's going to make decisions instead of dad, now it's completely up for grabs. And so it's interesting to go, and you feel like whatever makes it in the news is always the exciting stuff, everything else. And then when you watch a TV drama on Law and Order, everything happens in an episode. So you get
In
this
44 minutes. Yes.
this unsettled feeling like maybe things are going to change very quickly, because actually in our industry, a lot has changed faster than it used to. So it's just, I think it was the fear that it was an accelerant and it was going to actually make things change faster and maybe make them more chaotic, because I always have the idea that, if there's settled law, the courts are conservative in terms of overturning settled law, because we're not supposed to have every year the laws go back and forth different ways. And so I think there's just anxiety in terms of what happens in laws, and our area is supposed to be sleepy and slow, and it hasn't felt that sleepy and slow, but it still isn't going to go, Housewives of Orange County or something, so that's my spin.
Which, well, that might spice
I don't
it
know
up.
how we got
let's-
from Schoolhouse
let's
Rock to
see.
Housewives of Orange County. Yeah, that'd be a
I
little different.
mean, it would definitely
And then we're
make
going
this
to end it with
industry a
Below
little
Decks.
flashier.
So, okay.
No, you
That's true.
and,
So,
and you
all
bring
right.
up a good point. You look to Congress. That's mom and dad. Mom and dad, what's the law? And you know this, your parents. Okay, well,
Wait till your
generally
father
mom and
gets
dad
home.
are on the
Yeah.
same page,
Yeah.
right? Well, if dad makes a law,
Yes.
what am I going to do? I'm going to go try it out against mom. Well, if mom and dad have talked and they're on the same page, I get the same answer. Okay? If mom is Congress and dad is the Supreme Court, if we communicate and I write really clear laws, mom's not going to overrule me. I mean, maybe, but it's really hard. Like dad would have to come up with something like or mom would have to come up with something super draconian. Like, no, if you steal a cookie, I'm going to electrocute you.
Right.
That's probably it's cruel and unusual punishment, not a constitutional reason to challenge you, but if mom and dad are doing the thing, if you do your job, stay in your lane, and we won't have these problems. But yeah, I'm wishing on a drink. So, but this was lovely. I hope you found this helpful.
Jennifer, thank you so much. We're going to have our staff watch the important parts of this as well. We want to have you on again. So for those of you who know us and love us, find us on YouTube and subscribe to our podcast as well. If you need to comment on something specifically with us that you don't want to share on the internet, get in touch with us at sales@hunterbenefits.com. It's very nice when people do reach out to us through that. Thank you very much. And tell your friends and neighbors. Heck, tell the people you don't like to watch and like and subscribe just so we get our views up, right? So, all right. I need to come up with a cool outro that's very different. Well, I think it's cool. I have to come up with a different outro than what's going on the YouTube channel. But we'll do that. That'll show up at some point. So thank you very much, Catherine. See you later. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.